Welcome back to the shed. I'm Syd, Mackie's on the camera, and today we are going to be taking you through our pre-race bike maintenance routine. So if you follow our other channel, which you definitely should do, you know that we both race professionally, and we just finished up a cross-country stage race last weekend, and we are doing a 6-hour endurance race this coming weekend. So we put our bikes through a lot, and one of the ways that we keep them running well is having a regular maintenance routine and kind of a checklist in our head of what we need to check before a race. Even if you don't race, this video might be helpful because this is what you want to be thinking about every time you're going on a trip with your bike, or you have a really long ride planned, or just any event where you want to make sure that your bike is running well and you don't want to have to deal with maintenance or mechanical issues. Before we dive into the video, we want to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of this video, Fantic. This is the Fantic X9 Ace Mini air compressor. We have been using this on trips and including race trips recently to air up our tires in the morning. As you can tell, it is tiny. This can live in your car, it can fit in a backpack, it is very, very portable, and unlike the previous version of the Fantic, it has a built-in Presta adapter. You can unscrew this and switch it around if you need to pump up something with Schrader valves. So as you can see, turn it on. It remembers the last pressure that you put in. You can adjust that like so, and then it will auto turn off when it reaches your desired PSI. And I don't know exactly how long the battery lasts. Obviously that is going to depend on lots of factors, but if you're just putting in a couple PSI per day, which is usually what we're doing because our tires aren't going entirely flat, it lasts for a very long time. So we are super happy with this thing. The Fantic X9 Ace is currently on sale, and there's also an Amazon coupon that you can use for $10 off. You have to click that apply coupon box on your Amazon order. The link is bit.ly/X9Ace, or you can click on it in the description. So the first thing you want to do, obviously, is give your bike a bath, which, as you can tell, we are in desperate need of a bath here. And it's a bit of a motto here on this channel that it's not broke until it's clean and broke. So anytime you're looking into a maintenance issue, get it clean first and assess from there. So that is the first thing that we're going to do today, is quick bike wash. And we have another video that has much more detail on our bike wash routine. We'll put a link to that here. So while you dry your bike off is an awesome time to make sure nothing looks weird, nothing feels loose. If you have any scratches on your bike or on, really any carbon components, so on this bike that'd be handlebars as well and seat rails, you want to take a really good look at those and make sure you're not dealing with something that could be a structural issue and lead to a structural failure. This bike is looking pretty good. You want to make sure that you dry off and clean all of the seals of all of your suspension and dropper post. This is a great time to notice if something is leaking or if a seal is torn. Is torn the right word? You'll know it when you see it. If you've just washed your bike and you're doing this and your rag is coming up covered in oil, you have a problem. And you need to replace your seals, which we have done. We have done a fork lower service and seal replacement on this channel, and there will be a link to that in the description.
You can also do a visual check of the seals and just make sure that there's no cracks or anything on them, because they can dry out over time.
This is the moment to check the tread on your tire and see how you're doing there. This is looking pretty good. Both of these look good. However, I don't have x-ray vision, so I can't tell how much sealant I have left in there. And if you're going into a race or a big weekend, it is worth checking your sealant and making sure it is not dried out, especially if you do not remember how long ago you put sealant in there. Looking at you. I'm gonna go ahead and just pop that valve core all the way out. And I know, like, I feel like a lot of people are going to be like, I don't want to do this because it's a pain to reseat the tire and yada yada. But you know, it's also pain getting a flat because you had no sealant. And yeah, I feel like there's no sealant in there. Story of my life.
So you'll want to get the bead into the center the whole way around.
All the way around?
On that side.
I was hoping to avoid that.
Yeah.
It's a little low, but I've seen worse.
It's not all dried up at least.
Completely dried. But also, still glad that we did this.
Also, for those who will say, you can put the sealant in through the valve stem, that is true if you are not using Stan's race sealant, which seals bigger holes, but it means that you have to put it in.
I also would generally say, I mean, obviously it depends on your goals a little bit, but like we race cross country, at least that's what we've been doing the past couple weeks. That's what these bikes are. And I don't really want like an extra 100 grams of dried sealant hanging out. And if I don't need more sealant, I don't want the extra rotational weight. So I want to actually look at what I'm doing. Again, that may not be a concern for you, at which point, assuming you're not using the, I didn't prepare, assuming you're not using a sealant like the race sealant that will clog up your valve stem, go ahead and put it through the valve stem. It did pop that bead right on there, so.
All we had to do was the tubeless with a floor pump trick, which we'll link to that.
A few more things to do while you have your wheel off. Just a quick check of your spokes. By doing this, I can tell that nothing is loose. We don't have anything that's wildly, out of tune. Can also, this obviously you could have done while you had it on the bike, which would have been smart. Ugh. Can tell that things are pretty darn true. These wheels are a bit banged up, but I can kind of give them, there's some scratches here. They're clearly just cosmetic, so we're not worried about that. It is a carbon rim though, so if it looked like it was going through a layer of carbon or if it felt funny, that would be a no-go on this wheel. These are all very superficial little scratches from getting too close to rocks and such. If you have aluminum wheels, you want to look for any big dents. Probably if you have a big dent, you would have noticed something when you did the true check, and that would have tipped you off that you needed to look for a dent. Well, the rim jibber, my favorite tool. If you have aluminum wheels, get you a rim jibber. I don't know if they make them anymore, but it's not that different than an adjustable wrench, but it's specifically made to be the size for pulling out dents, and it works great. But anyway, that was a little tangent because these are carbon, so no rim jibbing. Look at your rotor. We found a really destroyed rotor that we keep around just for showing what destroyed rotors look like.
You can see that the outer layer of metal is worn away in places. So if your rotor looks anything like this, you are far beyond the point of needing to replace your rotor.
So compare that with my rotor, which has some signs of wear, but nothing like that.
Yeah, I mean, like the lines on them are normal. It's when you actually have like metal missing that
had to sound terrible. This was not ours, for the record. This was a donation. So the other thing I'm going to do is check the width of the rotor. Again, not something that we do every day or before every race, but when in doubt, when you're like, it's been a while since I had new rotors, you can check the width. There is a minimum width, min thickness 1.5.
So that's 1.5 millimeters.
So to check that, you're going to need calipers, 1.59. So we're doing good. While you have your wheels off to check your sealant or replace tires or whatever, oops, there we go. That always happens. It's a great time to also check your brakes. We're going to pull the pads out. We don't necessarily do this before every race because we have a pretty good idea of how long our brake pads last.
So what you're looking for here, turn them sideways for me, is that little spring is taking up like less than half.
Even less than a third, maybe?
Yeah. Of the width of the pad. And so there's plenty of life left in these pads.
A note about brake pads while you have them out examining them. You want to avoid getting your grubby little paws all over them because the oil from our hands can make your brakes squawk and complain. It'll probably burn off, but there we go. And we'll pop that back on. Then we'll do the same on the back. Don't forget your Jesus clip.
Why is it called a Jesus clip?
Jesus, take the wheel. When everything else has gone really wrong, this will probably keep your brake pads from falling out.
I always thought it was a Jesus clip because every time you take it off and you drop it, you go, Jesus!
I don't know. Maybe someone in the comments knows the origin of that term. At this point, we have checked our brake pads, we have checked the rotors, we have spun the wheels to make sure the brakes don't need to be centered. Again, you can look in the description of this video for videos on how to center your brakes if you were not so lucky as this. Next thing we're gonna do is pull these brake levers and see how we feel. And this one is pulling really far, which I don't love. It's pumping up, which again, that just means there's air in that line somewhere. Overall, I've been riding this bike quite a bit and it's been feeling fine. However, the fact that this is pulling to the bar when it's been at rest for a while, I don't love it. So we're gonna go ahead and do a quick lever bleed. I do not think, just because of how quickly it pumps up, I don't think there's a need to like flush the entire line. I also think the fluid should be pretty clean because these brakes are pretty new. But we will be able to tell if I'm wrong about that when we do the lever bleed.
As a note, if you are replacing your brake pads, replace the pads before you do the lever bleed.
The lever bleed comes last. You want to make sure you have your wheel on while you're doing this.
Or pull the pads and put a block or a shim. Yeah.
Pop this top off. And we're going to try real hard not to lose this bolt.
How's it looking there?
Dry.
Yeah, so you can often look in there, and if you don't see any fluid, then that's a pretty good sign that you definitely need a brake bleed. But we were pretty sure that Syd did anyway, so.
Slowly, carefully, so we aren't threading anything. Those guys thread or strip annoyingly easily.
Because it's plastic, yeah. So that snaps into the side there.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. And this little contraption. Okay. Usually I like to have this a little lower, but then nothing.
Well, it may have filled, like as soon as you put it on, it may have just filled up that extra space.
It feels good though, so this now is not pulling to the bar anymore. Again, lever bleeds are really easy. There's really no excuse to let your brakes feel like crap all the time when you could fix it with a lever bleed. I'm saying that to myself because I put off doing the lever bleeds for like months.
Also, we're going to do a visual inspection of the fluid after you've done the lever bleed. And if you have like black coming out of your lever, that's a pretty good sign that you need to do a full brake bleed.
Critical step. Put this back in before you unscrew it. Not that we've done that before. Actually, I don't know if I have done that. I think I've gotten perilously close. I got my blue shop tail out to deal with overflow. As you can tell, this is now much fuller than it was before. Do you think I should do the other side? It like really feels fine, but I guess it can't hurt, can it?
What was it that you were just telling yourself?
Yeah, stop delaying doing lever bleeds when they take 30 seconds.
Especially when you have already got it out and ready to go.
You've done. It's funny, this is the one that felt better and it's giving me way more air bubbles, so there you go, you never know. Cool. But the fluid is pretty darn clean in both of these, so that doesn't look like that filled that up at all.
Yeah, maybe do it, pop it back on.
There it is, beautiful. Wiping the chain down and relubing is something we will do every evening after every day after each stage, if we're doing a stage race or after any sort of race, we don't necessarily lube our chains after every single ride, but definitely every couple days, clean and lube. Keep things running smoothly, not making annoying squeaky noises. Nobody likes a squeaky chain. We use Squirt Lube, which is a wax-based lube. We have been using Squirt Lube for 12 years. It keeps your chain nice and clean and does not leave black gunk everywhere, which might be my favorite aspect. And then I'm also going to take this moment to run through all the gears. And if you are doing this, if you are encountering problems, you'll want to go watch our video about adjusting your derailleur. Because much better to do this in the comfort of your garage than on the trail. Just having your hands on the bike, testing all of these things, sometimes you notice problems that you otherwise wouldn't notice until you are in the start line or doing your warm-up, which is a bad time to notice things. While we're down here looking at the chain, we're going to take our handy dandy Shimano chain measuring tool widget. Convenient little tool for telling if your chain is worn. You can also do it with a ruler. I forget exactly the rule for that, but
It's a lot harder with a ruler. So you put the squeezy part in first.
oh, you put the squeezy part in? You're right.
Push
It
the
says
squeezy part
a
in,
big
yeah.
1 on it, doesn't it?
And then you drop the other side.
And you don't want it to fall in. If it falls in, new chain day. Doesn't fall in, you're doing good.
And check it in like 3 or 4 different spots around the chain.
Remind me how the ruler thing worked, though.
I think it's 1/2 inch per link. So you'd measure 12 links and make sure that they were 6 inches long.
Cool. I think we are good to go there. And then also, obviously, take a moment to look at your chain ring. Make sure it's not like flattened off, looking sad.
They talk about it looking like a shark fin. Like, you know how shark fins are curved?
This is an example of a not that clean cassette, but a functionally clean cassette that is in pretty darn good shape. I'm just gonna check the pressure here. Gonna add a little bit, get this to 66 PSI. We pretty much set our suspension up according to Fox's recommendations, which for the fork are on a nice little sticker here, but you can also find them all online by Googling the fork or shock that you are looking for.
Plus setup guide. That's what we generally do with the shocks is we set the sag based on, you know, the measurement, like get on the bike, bounce, push the O-ring up, get off, measure where it is. So we set our shocks to about 25% on our XC bikes. And then whatever that pressure that you put in to get to 25 PSI, you then use that in the Float SL setup guide to set the rebound. But then for the fork, they actually have a rebound recommendation on there.
This is a Fit 4 or grip damper?
It's a Fit 4.
Okay, so 12 to 10 on the rebound. Remind me, is that 12 to 10 from closed or from open?
Always closed, yeah. So counterclockwise or clockwise all the way.
12 or 10 or 11. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I'd do 10 probably.
On the low end?
Yeah, because you closed it all the way off and you're at the higher end of the pressure range. So you want lower end of the rebound range. So the reason is the less pressure you have in there, the faster you want your rebound because there's less air pushing it back up to full extension.
No, that makes total sense when you say it. I just was looking at if you look at the numbers. Oh no, they did write it 12 to 10 actually.
So then you'd pop the bike down and set the sag. We just did that recently, so we're not going to worry about it.
And again, you may know that your sag is good, so don't worry about it.
Or you may know what the pressure is already, at which point you can just check the pressure.
Little quick bearing check. Everything that spins, does it happily spin? Pretty good. Headset moves. Especially if you have been somewhere super wet and nasty and gritty, like you may find that your pedals are frozen and whatnot, at which point it might be time to at least pull those apart and clean them, if not replace the bearings.
Wheels are the other one.
While spinning the wheels. Yes, it's loud.
And that's your opportunity, like Syd was saying, to check whether or not it's true.
Brake is centered.
Yep, make sure you're not getting brake rub.
You can just get a lot of information from just spinning the wheels on your bike. This is something you should be doing before every ride, is these two things. One is just kind of picking your bike up like this and feeling if you feel any play, which usually means a bolt is loose. Sometimes it can mean the bearings are toasty toast. Everything's feeling super solid there. The other thing is a quick headset tightness. We checked bearing in the headset, that's moving freely. Put our hand, cup your hand around the headset there. Hold your front brake and do one of these. And if you feel or hear things going ka-clunk, then your headset is loose.
So you're wiggling the bike forward and backwards while you do that. Okay.
Yep. Does it kind of fall?
No. You'll have to push the bolt out before it falls.
Don't lose the bolts.
So now hold the rear triangle up slightly, because that's what's going to want to fall as you push that bolt out. There we go.
It's not quite how I envisioned that going, but all right. Now what?
Yeah, so then push this down and out of the way. And now you're just going to move the rear triangle through its movement.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Feels smooth?
Feels real good, actually.
Great. And we're not hearing any like crunchy noises?
No crunching, no... what else would you want to look?
Mostly just like crunching or stiffness.
Yeah,
exactly.
like a point where you're hitting a lot of resistance. Don't want that. And we gotta put it back together.
This is one that it's helpful to have a friend who can hold your rear triangle for you.
We're gonna hit everything on here with the torque wrench in a second, so I'm not gonna lose sleep on getting this, anything other than just tight. Cables and housing, like obviously you want to kind of keep tabs on your shifter cable. If you have a shifter cable, make sure it is not frayed. If you are on an electronic system, for God's sake, charge your batteries before the race. Even if you're like, it's fine, it never dies. It will die in the race. Everyone I know who has electronic shifting, it dies in the race. So, as far as shifter cables go, assuming you're still on cables, you wanna, again, we shifted through earlier just to make sure that the derailleur was shifting properly, but you also wanna pay attention to how that shifter lever feels. And this can be kind of a tricky one because we get really used to, especially if you only have one bike and you're riding one bike all the time, you get really used to how that shifter cable feels. However, if you feel like you are using a lot of force, or if you know it's been a while, it might be time to replace cables and housing. Again, we have a video for that. I think it can be really helpful if you have a bike you can compare it to, if you, just to like kind of get an idea of what your shifting is actually feeling like, because it can be kind of hard to tell once you've gotten really used to it.
Yeah, it degrades slowly. So it just gets worse and worse and you don't really notice. And then all of a sudden, boom, it feels terrible. And you're like, how did that happen?
Right. Same with any other cables. We are looking for any sort of bad fraying going on, anything not working. Looks like the lockout is a happy camper. I'll pull this down to have a look at the dropper post. Again, probably if you have a dropper post issue, but you're here. So check it, run it through a couple times, make sure it is doing what you want it to be doing. Again, a good time to check just make sure nothing's loose here. If your seat post is having a really hard time coming back up, that is often a sign that you have over tightened your seat clamps. So that's something to be aware of. I cannot tell you how many people have dropper post issues, and what's actually happening is this ferrule has just popped itself out, and therefore the dropper post isn't working. So that's always your first line of defense with dropper post issues. So just your saddle being tight may not be enough to show you that there are no problems. Usually we have our saddles marked with paint, but you can generally tell if your saddle has been moving. For example, there might be a dirt mark back here, but your saddle is actually up here. Or it's like slid all the way back and it's touching the front of the rails. One way or the other. That's a really good way to get knee problems. Yeah. So periodically checking and making sure your saddle hasn't moved is a really good call. The final thing we're going to do here is a bolt check. Especially if you guys have watched our race videos over on our Syd and Mackie channel, you know we are big fans of the bolt check, because I cannot tell you how many days and races have been ruined by bolts backing out. In fact, I think it might be the most common mechanical issue that we have both experienced and seen happen outside of flat tires. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, I know it's ruined a race for me. I was going to win that stage. It was an enduro race, and I had a chain guide.
It's always the bolts you don't see coming either.
Yeah.
It's usually not the big ones. It's the weird bolts like on your chain guide that back out and then you can't get to them with the multi-tool. So we do a bolt check before pretty much every race, and that essentially is just going through with a torque wrench and just confirming that everything is tight.
If you have a torque wrench. If you don't, you can do this without a torque wrench.
Yeah, definitely. You just go through and make sure everything tight. If you find something that's super loose, that's when it's helpful to have the torque wrench, because then you could get it torqued to the correct spec. But for just a precautionary measure, definitely don't not do this because you don't have a torque wrench. Like you will be better off in the long run to check the bolts and maybe be a little off on your torque. Okay, so we're gonna start with a 5. Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, basically, you just want to go through every single size of Allen key and find every bolt on the bike that will fit that Allen key.
We are using the Feedback Sports torque wrench. I love this thing. It is super easy to use. Got some 5s on the suspension, but this one is the one we took out to check so it's not tight. What bolts have you had fall out? Just story time while we do this.
I think the chain guide one is the one that I remember specifically.
Yeah, that was a mess, and it was in an enduro race, which is definitely worse. The torque wrench, you want to make sure you're holding it in the... Oh, that was kind of loose again. Or do I need to get somebody in there?
I think it's got one on the backside, which I think is a 3, if I remember correctly.
Other bolts that are commonly overlooked: water bottle cages. You wouldn't think it would be catastrophic to have your water bottle cage fall off, but at the bare minimum, it's as annoying as all get outs. What should I put this to for this one?
Pretty low for the water bottle, like 3, maybe 5. What bolts have you had come loose?
Lots of water bottle cages. Brake rotors, but that's not a bolt. At least not for us, but if you have a 6 bolt, definitely check that. Yeah, water bottle cages. I don't think I've had it in a race. Oh, handlebars for sure. But yeah, my saddle. You can put a clip of that in right now. Lots of handlebar things for me, because I went through a phase of being really terrified to tighten things on carbon handlebars, which meant they moved around, which, spoiler alert, is actually worse for your carbon handlebars.
This one says 6 Newton meters, apparently.
Doop, 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 doop. Ooh, that was a little loose on the bottom there. And then these guys are 5s on the top.
Yeah. I think in general, for carbon, you can safely assume 5.
Really gay. Case in point. Da, 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 da. Am I doing something wrong?
No. Let's say, yeah, 4 to 6 Newton meters.
Well, that was definitely loose. Admittedly. I don't know. Sometimes I will say, I think there's some different schools of thought here. You definitely don't want it coming loose. I hate, though, when you crash and it's been tightened too much to move it back by hand, which I know you're not supposed to do on carbon handlebars, but ain't nobody got time to get a
multi-tool
out. Yeah, those aren't going anywhere if I crash on those. I'm never getting them back, so... Oh, brake. I've had brakes come off for sure. Well, not come off, but get loose before. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really annoying one too, because like your brakes, like your brake will typically still work, but oh, it is so loud. You do not want that to happen. One of our friends at Moab Rocks had his saddle come off, and then he lost this top plate. Is that what happened?
I think so. He had to quit the day.
Because nobody yeah, that's good and tight. We're good.
Yeah.
I think we're doing pretty good here. Pedals, also, nobody wants a pedal to fall off. I'm not using a torque wrench on this because it just needs to be hella tight, and I know I personally am incapable of over-tightening a pedal.
Yeah.
Well, if it needs to be tighter, I ain't getting it there. It's 9 Newton meters, so that's probably 9 Newton meters. I've like never over tightened a bolt in my life though, so that's why I don't stress about it too much. Under tightening, absolutely. That is all for the pre-race maintenance routine. This is what we would do here in our home shop before we leave for a race or a trip. If you're doing a multi-day race or a multi-day trip, there are a couple things that you should do every day after you're done riding. Number one, clean your bike, especially if it's dirty. You don't necessarily have to fully wash it in a hose if you are not getting very muddy, but you do want to kind of wipe things down, check those suspension seals, and of course, clean and lube your chain. Every day that you ride your bike, you want to generally be kind of doing that visual and feeling inspection that we've talked about. That's checking to make sure suspension bolts haven't come loose, checking your headset, feeling your brakes every time. You should be doing that before you go ride, but also at the end of the day. And of course, you want to deal with any issues that came up during your ride, whether that's some shifting irregularities or brake rubbing or something more serious. Trust us, you want to do that right away. You do not want to wait until after you are showered and fed. It will not become more appealing to work on your bike. I mean, maybe you can eat, do not shower. Major kind of lesson here is that the more hands-on you are with your bike, the more likely you are to recognize issues before they happen. And that includes just feeling your brakes every time you take your bike out the front door, like feeling the shifting and just kind of monitoring that. Also, of course, keeping track of when you last did brake pads, when you last did tire sealant, when you last changed your tires, like inspecting your tires for wear. All of that doesn't add up to like any huge tasks on a given day, but makes it so that when you do go to do this kind of pre-race routine, it's pretty easy like it was for us. And one final thing, of course, every morning you want to set your tire pressure. You do not want to do this the night before or the day before because temperatures make a huge difference. And if you are starting a race in the cold, you do not want to flat early on in the race because you have very low pressure. So again, huge thank you to Fantic for sponsoring this video. You can use your X9 Ace to check and set up your tire pressure every morning before your race or ride.